Hi, everyone. I think we can go ahead and get started. It's noon. Thank you all so much for joining us today. My name is Claire Cook, and I will be the moderator for the panel today. I'm a member of the DWLA and an associate attorney at Jackson Lewis, where I do employment litigation. I've been practicing for about 7 years, but the whole point of today's panel is to get some insight from some of our newer practicing attorneys who are a little more fresh in their careers. So we'd like to give the law students and recent law school graduates kind of a real look into what they can expect right after law school and landing that job. But before we get started, I wanted to give a huge thank you to DWLA for hosting this panel discussion, as well as SMU for co-sponsoring. And also just a special thank you to DWLA for continuing to be advocates for women lawyers in our community. It's so important that we continue to support each other and listen to our fellow women lawyers and remember that we can learn a lot from each other and kind of combine our knowledge and experiences to support one another, which is the purpose of today's panel. I think a lot of times we hear from attorneys that have been practicing for longer. We get war stories or lessons from people that have been doing this. And we don't always get to hear from our newer attorneys. So we wanted to have a discussion today with some of our more recent law school grads and kind of get an idea of what you can expect shortly after graduation and not just after the first few years that you've made it down the road. So today we are thrilled to have with us four awesome panelists. They are newly practicing women attorneys, and I wanted to introduce them to you. We've got Brianna Blackman. She is a 2019 SMU law grad, and she's an attorney at Winston Strawn. And we've got Tashina Bird. She's a 2017 SMU law school grad, and she is an assistant city attorney for the Dallas Attorney's Office. And we've got Catherine Parsley. She's a 2018 SMU law grad and an associate attorney at Vincent Elkins. And we've got Alexis Swansea. She is a 2018 SMU law grad and an associate attorney at Kessler Collins. Also, I wanted to let y'all know throughout the panel, if you have any questions, comments, please feel free to use the Q&A feature at the bottom and ask us anything, and we'll try to leave some time at the end to get to those questions that you may have for the panelists. So to get started, I'd like for each of the panelists to kind of introduce themselves and let us know briefly what your work does look like. Let us know, where you are, the day-to-day practice, typical work hours, caseload, how many people you work for, report to, the types of work you handle. And I guess, Brianna, I'll start with you.
Sounds good. I am Brianna Blackman, practice attorney at Winston & Strawn. I work in litigation and the most recent graduate on the panel. So for me, my typical work day before, I would say, COVID happened, it was about 9 to 6 for the normal hours in a day. Normal, I say normal hours, depending on what you're doing. I work on about maybe 4 or 5 different projects that are all generally ongoing, depending on where you are in the case. Being, new in the fall, you kind of get plugged into wherever the case is that you've been assigned, and it's your job to, kind of get caught up on the case, find out what's going on, and then to start, working. And now that COVID's happened, still working from home now, and the pace has changed a little bit, but still generally, doing work and, chatting back and forth with partners now. It's just either Zoom conferences or emails or things of that nature.
Hi, I'm Tashina Bird. I'm currently in the City Attorney's Office for Dallas in the General Counsel Division. It's a government position, and my hours look like 9 to 6, or depending on what time I come in. Um, the type of work I do is typically, very transactional. I draft contracts, I negotiate contracts, I process the open records request for the city, and my section particularly advises like the mayor, city council, and the city departments. And I typically report to 2 people, the chief of my section and then the deputy chief. Thank you.
I'm Catherine Parsley. I'm in the real estate group at Vincent & Elkins. And my typical day before I started working from home was I'd probably get to the office between 8 and 8:30 and leave between like 7 and 8 p.m. And then now that I'm working from home, I've kind of shifted a little bit later, even though my commute is much shorter. So I probably work now I start between 8:30 and 9 and probably end between 8 and 8:30 on a typical day. I generally report to maybe 3 senior attorneys and 2 partners on any given project. And I have probably about 5 to 8 matters going on at any one time. So there's a lot of overlap. My section is not huge. So I work with the same senior associates and partners pretty regularly. And all of our work is transactional. So I'm drafting, I'm reviewing, working with due diligence, communicating with third parties and clients and all sorts of things like that. A lot of variety in each day, which I really enjoy.
And to round out the group, my name is Alexa Swansea. Thanks, Claire, for the introduction. I am an associate attorney at Kessler Collins. I'm finishing up my 2nd year and going into my 3rd year. I do primarily commercial litigation, all different types of disputes, tax protests, regular contract disputes, things of that nature, and a little bit of real estate. I've started to get into more of healthcare compliance, some of our clients in that. So I've had a hint of transactional reviews and things like of that nature. My workday is typical 9 to 6, depending if I'm working on a big project, might stay a little bit later, things like that. Might shift a little bit depending when I get to the office, like Tashina said. I report, since we are a smaller office, I report to different attorneys depending on the matter. I have one primary supervisor that gives me most of the work, but I think it's just the nature of what I've worked on in the past. And I'm starting to shift from just project-based into case-based more. So I'm handling about 5 or 6 projects with about 10 ongoing matters.
Awesome, thanks y'all. So I guess the transition from law school to work, can you kind of tell us what that was like? Obviously law school is a big enough challenge in itself, but what is something that you did not expect when you started working after law school? Things like, did you find that you had more or less free time?
Yes, so to give a little bit of background, I went straight through from high school to undergrad to law school. So this is the first long-term full-time position I have had. I put in the time during law school and everything, so my hours varied. I had a class here in the night, in the morning, so I know I put in probably the same amount of time as I do work, but the transition that I was not expecting was coming to the same place every day around the same time. That was a bigger shock to me that I didn't think would be big. I was like, oh, okay, that's great. I'll get in a habit. But I didn't realize I had been out of the habit so long, and it was so it was varied based on my classes that I did not realize that was the biggest shock. So I guess one day I might work like 12 hours, one day I might work, 5 hours. That was hard trying to even that out to be more of a 9 to 6 type of job and to be more productive every single day and not just one day and then have a lighter load the next day.
So to carry off of kind of what Alexis was saying, for me, my transition since I've been working here for just under a year was just to understand how fast paced it is at a firm. You start working and you get assigned projects and you meet everyone in the office, and you get a legal secretary in your office, and then you have these matters, and it's like, okay, great, do lawyering. And initially you're like, okay, like I'm a lawyer, this is so great, what am I doing? Oh my God, I have no idea what I'm doing. I've got these matters that I have to do, somebody is looking to me to do something. And my first assignment was like, okay, here you go, draft this discovery, or it was supplemental discovery. And so then it was like, well, where do I find the original discovery? This case has been going on for like 2 years. I don't know what's going on. Is someone going to tell me what's going on? And for me, it was that realization that no one's holding your hand. Yes, you should 100% ask questions, get help if you need help to try to figure out what's going on, but it's feet first into the fire, like figure it out. You have to draft discovery now and it's due, tomorrow. So, and that for me was a change to be like, okay, I can do this, and here I go. So.
All right. What about professional challenges? What would you say would be the hardest part about starting your legal career as a young lawyer?
I would say I think the biggest challenge or the hardest part about being a young lawyer is knowing how to ask for more or demanding your worth just because you don't know the standards at all. I think it's one of those things a lot of attorneys don't talk to you about when you enter the profession. And so I talked to a recent attorney, I think she just graduated maybe about a year ago, and we were laughing because she made the analogy to like a plane ride and how you are learning how to land a plane. It's bumpy, it's shaky, and you're concerned for your life because you don't know if you're going to make it. And that's kind of what the practice of law is like. It's kind of scary. No one talks to you about what you're worth, what you should demand, what you're entitled to as an attorney at this point. And I think it's just one of those things that you learn as you go. I would say find a really good mentor inside your employment and outside of your employment so that you kind of understand and learn what's going on within the organization and then also what's going on outside of the organization to help you figure out what the standard is, what you should be demanding, and asking for more. And lastly, I will say not everyone plays the role of a mentor. You'll find some really good people, but then they like forget about you or they don't respond to you or you realize they aren't as helpful. It's okay. You can let some of those people go. Find someone who is willing to put in the work with you.
One of the challenges that I faced early on was getting feedback. It's sometimes difficult to get feedback because especially if you work in a firm, everyone is concerned about billable hours. It's important. It's an important part of working at a firm. So people are often concerned about making sure that they're getting their work done, that they are doing the things that they need to do in order to make sure their practice is running properly. But as someone who is new, who was not, I felt, proficient, who's turning in work, sometimes you'd send off an assignment and you just never hear back from the person. And I was like, and you think about, was it terrible? Was it good? And you kind of have to not necessarily hound, but just really stick to it when you go back to get feedback, whether or not that's sending an email, popping by someone's office, or being like, hey, can I just get 10 minutes with you so that we can quickly go over this work product, because chances are you're going to have to do that same project again. And what you don't want to do is be making the same mistake over and over again because you didn't get feedback on that first time and you could have made a simple change to have a better product. So asking those questions and getting feedback, I think that is sometimes a challenge, but one that is worth kind of fighting for. So.
I think that's really good advice. I think that's something that a lot of new attorneys definitely struggle with, and walking that line of you don't want to bother the partner that you're working for, but at the same time you're trying to professionally grow. So I think that's really good advice. Um, what about boundaries and kind of the line between work and life, your personal life and then your work life? Do you find that you're able to set boundaries? And if so, what kind of tools or tactics do you use? So, do you check emails after hours? Do you give out your cell phone to clients? What sorts of strategies do you use for boundaries?
I'll jump into this one first. I think that setting boundaries is very important and definitely something that everybody should do. I also think that it's a practice because it's constant decisions you're making every day. It's not like you set your boundary and it's just done. It's every time you have to make a choice, you have to think about your boundaries, and if you really do have time to take on that extra project, or if you really do need to scale it back because you've been overworked or your plate's already overflowing. For me, I find that those are not only choices I have to make when other people present me with options or questions, but also when I'm trying to answer them. So I have to set boundaries against myself, because I, like probably a lot of other law students and lawyers, really want to do a good job and be there and be available. But sometimes that's not what I need, like for my own mental health or sanity. And so I have to tell myself, listen, your plate's full and you want to be there, but they're going to understand that your plate's full. They can see your hours that you're working or that you're billing or whatever. It's okay to set that boundary and to let yourself have that boundary. And so I think it's just constantly a practice. And I do think that it's something you should establish early, because it's really hard to change what people expect of you if you have not set your boundaries from the get-go. You can do it and you should do it, but it's easier if you just start out that way. Because one way that I like to think about boundaries is that you're teaching other people how to treat you. You're telling them what you're willing to do and what you're not willing to do. And as long as your boundaries are reasonable, people respect that. It's good for you and it's good for them, because they know what to expect of you. And that's always a good thing. So one way that I practice boundaries is that I don't have my firm email on my personal phone. My firm offered a separate cell phone package. And so I have a fully separate work cell phone that has my work email, and I can call through my office line and everything on that phone. But my personal phone does not interact with my work stuff at all. And that helps me, because when I go to bed at night, I leave my work phone in the kitchen. And if somebody really needs me, they can call me on my cell phone, but that doesn't ever happen. And then I get up in the morning and I can start my day before I go downstairs, and then I check my emails and do whatever I need to do. But that's one way that I create some separation. And I do think that there's a difference between checking your emails and responding to emails. So you should definitely check your emails before you go to bed and on the weekends, but you don't necessarily need to respond to your emails on the weekends. You need to make a judgment call about whether or not it needs to be responded to. And if it does, then that's part of your job. But if it doesn't, then you respond to it during normal business hours the next day or on Monday or whatever. So again, it's just kind of a practice. You're just constantly making those decisions about what you need and about how you can best show up for the people around you.
I totally agree with Catherine on that. It's a constant choice, and I think it's easier to start earlier rather than trying, you're 10 years down the road and you're like, oh, I don't answer emails on weekends, and your clients are like, oh, I always did. That sort of thing. My firm did not offer a cell phone plan, so it's just my cell phone. On my business card, I decided not to put my cell phone number on there just because it's my personal cell phone. I pay for the minutes, things like that. I do have my work email attached to it, so I can easily scan. Same thing as with Catherine. And for me, my talking with my supervisor directly, we were able to he knows, you know, if I absolutely need something, I will let you know. If not, when I'm responding to emails at 3 a.m. on a Sunday morning, you don't need to be up with me to, you know, respond. But I'm screening the emails, but I'm like, all right, that can wait. Or if I'm waiting in line, you know, or doing something, I'm like, oh, I can just send, okay, sounds good, you know, just so he has it off his plate. It's a constant thing. Now we're talking about COVID world, and depending on, you know, if you ever have a work from home situation to where you don't have access to your office phone where you can make calls. And that was something that I had some difficulty with, because I didn't want to give out my cell phone to certain clients, you know, things like that, because I don't think that they would recognize my office phone when things went back to normal. So I would come into the office and make calls, but I gave my cell phone number to certain clients I knew wouldn't abuse the privilege. I also think it depends on what type of practice you're in as well. I know some mentors I have that are in family law, and that is one of the things where, you know, a lot of clients, they can only call after hours or things like that. And so they decide to invest in a completely separate phone and things of that nature, to where, because you're going to have clients calling you at 3 a.m. in the morning, you know, things like that. Right now, most of my clients are my superiors. So if they really wanted to get a hold of me, they would be calling my cell phone or texting me, which they have done in the past, but they haven't abused it. So if you're having issues with that or things, maybe just having a conversation with someone you trust at your firm, or even outside of your firm, and say, hey, how do you deal with this? Like, you know, them constantly calling or texting you, and seeing if that maybe you are reading too much into it, saying, hey, I'm sending this email so when you get into work you can deal with it, versus I need you to take care of this right now, is something that I think we'll learn as you come with time, and maybe asking your mentor or your champion, the person at the firm that'll go to bat with you, or other mentors, with saying, hey, how do I deal with this situation?
So I know things are, and each of you keep mentioning COVID, pre-COVID. I know things are a little bit different with COVID, but just in general, what kind of, are you still able to get experience and practical hands-on experience? Are you, you know, observing depositions or attending client meetings? You know, just can you give us an idea of how much experience you've been able to acquire at this point in your careers?
Yeah. So for me, I'm in a relatively small group at my firm compared to the sizes of some of the other groups at my firm. And that has allowed me to get a lot of one-on-one experience with clients and with partners. And that has not changed very much since working from home, which is great, because most of our meetings that we did before were via telephone, and we just do conference calls most of the time. And so we've just kept doing conference calls or doing emails like normal. So that has been a really good thing, is that I haven't really lost that contact now in this new environment. But it's definitely something that I think is worth asking when you're trying to pick a firm or an organization that you want to work for, asking how much experience you would get as a younger attorney, to see if you would get things like, if you would be able to email the client directly, you know, if that type of communication is something that you will get at an early age, because the more you see it and the more you do it, the better it's like practicing anything else in law or life. And so it's nice to be able to have those experiences and to work with, like I work with a lot of third parties, coordinating materials and whatever. And that's something else that's been really good for my development, is because I get a better feel for how things work and how people interact. And I get to practice my professionalism and doing all of those good things. So that's a really important thing to consider when you are looking at where you want to work and what type of job you want, is to think about what you want out of it and asking the questions to try to figure out if your potential job will meet those needs that you have.
And I will add on to what Kat Catherine said, in my previous role, I was at a smaller firm, so I was able to get plenty of hands-on experience. I was able to observe and attend and take depositions. I went to trials, mediations, hearings. I got to hold my own client meetings. Even at one point, I was able to draft a motion and have it argued in a highly publicized case, to the point this national attorney I was going up against came up to me after with his card, told me to stay in contact with him. So it was just I think in a smaller firm, you get thrown in the fire a little bit more. And so I would say, like Catherine said, keep that in mind. If you want more experience, you probably will get that in a smaller setting. But with the government now, with me working in the government, I do get a lot of hands-on experience there as well. I work, directly with the mayor. I speak to the city departments probably every single day. I am speaking with the public when they want to request certain records, videos, or anything from the city. I also, get to negotiate against opposing counsel about certain settlements and different contracts. So I have gotten a lot of hands-on experience within my first, couple of years of practice. But I will say, keep that in mind. If the opportunity presents itself, have confidence in yourself that you can do it. They wouldn't give an opportunity to someone that isn't ready or they did not feel like could not do it. So I would say, if the opportunity presents itself for you to get hands-on experience, do so. Be ready for it. Every expert had to start somewhere.
I think that's really good feedback. What about the topic of time management? I know as newly practicing attorneys, you can't always control how your time is spent, and you feel like you're being pulled in a million different directions. How do you manage the time management expectations you have of you? Do you have face time requirements at work? What kind of tools have you learned to kind of help control your time?
Yes, so I'm not sure if we have necessarily FaceTime requirements. I think that, if you went missing for a few days and nobody's heard from you, they might reach out just because they're worried, that sort of thing. But I generally come in at least during my day, unless I'm I'm sick or I have some doctor's appointments, things of that nature. So I don't believe they require me to be in here every single day exactly from this time to this time. They're pretty flexible. Now, if you were low on your hours and stuff, we might have a conversation about you need to be at work a little bit more, things like that. But if you're generally responsive and things like that, I don't think they have an issue. Time management, I have, one thing I have learned is communication. That is the biggest thing that you can do with your supervisors, and not just communication when you finish a project or are running out of time. I think you need to go to whoever you're doing the project for and just kind of gauging a sense of time. The one thing that I always had issues with was I like structure, and they're like, "Oh yeah, get it to me whenever you can," and I'm like, what does that mean? Does that mean, are you expecting me to spend like an hour on it, 2 days on it, a week on it? That was the hardest thing for me because I didn't want to push them, because I was like, okay, because they might not know how much time you're going to spend on it. Usually, because I've gotten into a groove with the people that I'm working with, I might walk by their office and say, hey, I'm still working on this. When are you looking at needing it by, after I've kind of gotten into the project, or just a simple email saying, hey, I'm working on this for you, because they might, even the same person that is assigning you a project, they might come back and assign you another one and forget that you're still working on this project, and they're expecting that this is the second project's all you have to work on. So just making sure, being refreshed, or if you have a conflict between two partners, my firm has told me it's not my responsibility to learn my priorities in my projects. That's when you go to the supervisor and say, hey, I have this, and this, but this person wants me to work on this. I just want to make sure we're all good with, I understand my priorities and what I need to work on first. And that's usually when the partners will link up and say, hey, when do you actually need this by? Can she work on my thing first?
I'll echo off of Alexis. I agree with a lot of what she said. It's the same for us at our firm. It's not really a FaceTime requirement. Our general hours are about 9 to 6, but depending on your project, you might be in a little longer. I like to come to the office early sometimes because it's very quiet and no one is here, and then I can be super focused on what I need to do. Or, if you need to get something done, then, you might be there later than 6 o'clock. There's been a lot of times where I've had to stay late, but nobody's walking by your office being like, are you in your office, like billing, doing work? That's not what is happening here. In terms of time management, I agree with Alexis. I also like structure, and that's not necessarily something that you get. So I tried to create structure for myself. I have a whiteboard in my office with all of my matters written down, with things that are coming up due, with dates, as well as my Outlook calendar. I live and die by my Outlook calendar because I'm going to forget things when things are due. If I have a meeting, if there's space time that you need to schedule because you need to go and speak with someone, that allows me to stay organized, at least, so I know when things are due. And I think for me, that kind of really is what determines my time management of the priority of the project, whether or not you have, a little bit more time to work on it versus, hey, we need this done within 48, 72 hours. And at that point, you get the project done. There isn't really anything else that you're going to do but get your work done. And I completely agree with Alexis on if you have two conflicting matters. If you're already committed to doing something else and another partner or a senior associate comes in and is like, hey, I need you to jump on this and do this, then you let them know. I would love to help out on that. Here are the other things that I have already committed to, and you let other people duel it out, because you don't want to, be saying, oh no, I'm too busy. You're going to want to think of a better phrasing for how you're going to communicate with people about what it is that you're doing. When I got here, one of the partners told me, have a good attitude about everything you do and try to be a yes man so that you can get as much experience on different projects as you can, because people want to see you have a good attitude and have good work product. So, don't let being too busy, hold you back from, getting really cool experience.
I think that's really good insight. Yeah, a lot of times new attorneys have the struggle between saying no and wanting to say yes to everything. And I think that's key, just communication, to let people know what exactly you have on your plate and try to, communicate and prioritize what actually is something that needs to be done before something else. And I think that's really good insight that you have. As far as vacation. So for those of you in law school, you may or may not know this. This was a surprise for me. I didn't really think about this when I was in law school, but a lot of law firms don't operate on the traditional PTO. You get 2-3 weeks off, the formal workplace structure. A lot of law firms kind of just say, as long as you get your billables in, take off time as you're able to, obviously get your work done, but there's not a formal policy or a formal structure. So I think that leads a lot of new attorneys to think that there's this kind of stigma or fear of taking a vacation. I know I personally didn't take a vacation until my second year, and like an actual multi-day long vacation. And I went to Mexico for a week, and I was so nervous to tell my partner that I was planning this vacation. I thought that, it would be a problem. And he was like, well, of course, take a vacation, be a human. Yes, you should do that. And then I didn't didn't know why I was so nervous about taking this vacation. So I guess for y'all, what's been your experience with taking time off, and have you taken time off? Do you feel okay about doing that? And if you have, what kind of trips have you planned and the duration?
So when I accepted my current position, I was just like going through benefits and stuff like that. And he goes, "Yeah, we don't have a vacation policy." And immediately I was like, "Oh God, what did I get myself into?" I was like, "Oh, great." And then he clarified, but I feel like there was like at least a 5-minute pause. There probably wasn't, but it felt like, oh, well, looks like retirement, is my first vacation. But the thing is, like, he goes, just communicate with the people you're working with or have projects with, let us know, and just get your work done. And then other than that, it's no issue. And I've seen other people take vacations. I know there is 2 types of thought. I've seen attorneys in my office that bill like upwards of 300 hours a month and do not take a vacation, but they also recognize that other people need to, and that's fine, and they don't count against it. Personally, going into my second year, I took some Fridays and Mondays off if there was like a wedding or something or like that. But I did take a vacation to Nashville last year, and I went from like Wednesday to Sunday, just kind of testing out the waters. I was so scared though. They told me, and they were like, "Yeah, have fun, everything's great." And I still took my laptop just in case. I never opened it, and I screened emails, but I never opened it. I did have another vacation scheduled for about a week this year, and actually my supervisor was like, "You should go." It was for the Albuquerque Balloon Fiesta and my bucket list thing, but it was canceled. So I'm kind of reassessing whether or not, just kind of keep working through or take a vacation. But that's kind of my experience. Oh, I will say I do know some newer attorneys. They did put that they have vacation on there, put it on the send a calendar invite. I think now, I'm not sure if it's because of the times and people think, oh, well, you're not going to go on vacation because of everything that's going on in the world. And they started emailing, and the person worked their entire vacation while at a family's home because they just didn't know. So I guess it's just kind of one of those things, just communicate and be aware, and maybe it's one of those boundaries questions.
I totally agree with Alexis that you have to communicate when you're planning to take a vacation and what you expect to do. So like if you're, taking a Friday to travel to a wedding, but generally like you're going to be in the car or whatever, and you don't mind answering emails or helping out on stuff, then tell people like, I'm going to be traveling, but I'll have my computer, so I'll be available. But if you're doing something and you're like, I'm generally not going to be available, you just tell people that. It's setting expectations and boundaries, I think, again. And so my firm does have a vacation policy. We get, I think, 2 weeks as junior associates. But it's very loose. And when I first started, I remember going in, I wanted to take the day before Thanksgiving off, and it was like not a big deal. But I went in to all the people I was working with, and I was like, "Do you mind?" And they were like, "It's fine." And then I went to the head of our department, and I was like, "Can I take this day off?" And he was like, "Yes, you're fine. It's fine." And then it took me all of that rigmarole to realize a lot of it is people trust you to be an adult. And so when you decide you're going to take vacation, you have to plan in advance and communicate and get your work done. And then everybody, in my experience, is going to be fine with it. So I have not taken a major vacation yet. I was supposed to take just under 2 weeks off a couple months ago, but of course that got canceled, unfortunately. And so I now have a trip planned for not next week, but the week after. And even though we are actually going on a road trip and hopefully being very, very, very responsible, but I think it's totally worth taking a vacation, even if you're working from home, because you're still working, and that's still hard, and you still need, the point of a vacation is to relax and get away and reset and make yourself feel like you're more than a human other than, just your work. There's more to you than that. and vacations can really help with that. So I would encourage you to take vacations early and just be reasonable and communicative about when and what you're doing. And I think that most people are happy for you to go take vacations because they also want to go take vacations. So it's kind of a give and take situation.
As far as being a woman attorney, what can you share with us about that? Do you have any particular experiences that you faced, or is everything just normal? Do you find that you have any kind of work initiatives to or programs that support women?
I'll say it's been very normal, nothing out of the ordinary in terms of like, you're a woman and an attorney. We haven't had any, situations like that. Winston's been really great. We do have women's initiative. It's called the Women's Leadership Initiative. Basically to allow the women from the offices to get to know each other. And we put on either kind of seminars where once they brought in a few partners from the different offices to kind of speak on their experiences. And then we had a guest speaker who was an attorney. And this kind of allowed the ladies from the Dallas office and the Houston office to get together and mingle with each other and get to know each other, because what they want is for us to be A, women supporting women, and B, to make sure that the offices get to know each other, because our office has many different locations, and it's so great to be able to call up somebody else or to have work from a different office, and you're always working with different people. Relationships are so important, and that's what they're really trying to do, is to help us to build relationships. I think recently one of the female partners coordinated a conference call for the Dallas office with the London and the Paris office, just so we could get to know some of the ladies abroad. And we do programs where it's, hey, maybe we had a restaurant, bring a fellow female attorney friend, let's get people in different industries mingling together. So, you can put together this for a future relationship. They've done a really great job with that. And we've got some really great women, female partners here who are really kind of taking the lead on that and trying to, be inclusive and supportive. So.
Yeah, being a smaller firm, we don't necessarily have maybe groups and initiatives. At my current firm, had no issue. I kind of felt like one of the same. We have a few other female associates too, and I feel like they kind of, without me realizing it, looked out for me and would give me advice. I don't know if it'd be the same advice they would give a guy or not, but also at one of my previous employment opportunities, this was the first kind of realization that I wasn't like a boy, I guess. I realized I was a girl, don't worry, but before in the working professional sense, I was on an exit interview, and I guess, person interviewing me was talking about and was being very blunt with me, and I appreciated the bluntness, but I was a little taken aback. The person said, well, we think you're a wild card because you don't have someone in your life to complete you, and that you will be unhappy and try to leave and go somewhere else. And I was kind of like, I was so shocked by it, and my response was, well, I guess I can go and take somebody and have them be with me, but I think you would be representing me pro bono on kidnapping charges. And I mean, it just came out, and then I realized I probably was not getting this job. What I didn't realize, though, was after that he didn't ask all the single person, that he said to the male counterpart kind of me, saying, oh, well, we're not really worried about you because you're a young male that is making a lot of money. And I was like, okay. One of those things, it happens. It doesn't really taint my experience. I kind of look back at it and be like, okay, glad that opportunity was not opened to me, because I'm at a great place. But just be aware that, things like that still do happen. They're not always myths. But, my advice is handle it professionally, maybe not joke about kidnapping on your experience, but it is the way that, you decide, but maybe kind of be aware whenever you're searching for employment opportunities, if you haven't, or even once you get there, just make sure that you're aware if you would feel comfortable. And if you're not, reflect, take stock, and determine whether or not, if it's a particular person or if it's the culture of the firm as well. Thankfully, I think we're moving into an area, time that we hopefully are more inclusive, and it's normal for a woman to be there.
And I will add very quickly that I've had the unique experience of having women attorneys as supervisors in both of my positions. And so I think that's a unique aspect because that doesn't always happen. And then even specifically, I've had to report to Black women. And if you're in the state of Texas, I think Black women attorneys make up 2% of all attorneys. So for me to experience that in 2 jobs has been an incredible experience. And so I just wanted to add that.
I'll jump in with my experience. Like Brianna, my firm has a women's initiative, and they do a good job of connecting us not only within our Dallas office, but within other offices. And that's been really nice. And they also set up things like happy hours with the leadership. So a lot of our leadership is still male, not exclusively. We're, I think, making a lot of progress, but that type of thing takes time. So currently a lot of our leadership is still male. And so our women's initiative sets up happy hours with them so that young female associates can get exposure to these leaders who are like partners in other practice groups or that type of thing where you wouldn't run across them in your day-to-day practice. And they also do women's specific business development programs. So they'll take all of our like female partners and senior associates and counsel, and they'll set up business development opportunities with female in-house counsel or just anybody in other industries. And they do fun things like they had a floral workshop where they all went and had dinner and then like, I don't know, we like designed a flower arrangement. And they do things where they're not trying to like cram people into the typical male type experiences like going golfing or whatever, which women may enjoy, but I think that it's nice that they're trying to do things that instead of trying to be like men, they are doing things that women have told them that they would like to do, and they're listening and they're creating those opportunities. So I think that that's a nice thing that our firm is doing, and that I think is becoming more common, like the DWLA. It's great to have these networks so you can meet other women and talk to them and feel supported within and outside of your place of employment.
So as far as getting second jobs, I know it's not always easy landing that job out of law school, and we've worked really hard to get that first job. But I think a lot of times new attorneys are kind of hesitant to think about getting a different job, whether it's just the fear of unknown or they don't actually know what else is out there. Have any of you actually left your first job that you had out of law school and gone somewhere else? And if so, what kind of prompted that decision, and what was that like?
Claire, I have. I'm actually on, I guess, my 3rd job since passing the bar. I initially started off with Westlaw. I learned to hone skills there, my legal researching skills. I can find anything on Westlaw since leaving there. But the second job, it was at a law firm. It was litigation, commercial litigation. And what really prompted me to leave the firm is just I was unhappy and it was impacting me as a person. I think it's kind of taboo for attorneys to talk about how to leave. So I wasn't sure if it was the right decision, if I was making an emotional decision. So I really, reached out to my mentors. I, asked them questions, gave them the entire facts, even the stuff that I had to hold myself accountable for. And I needed them to help me understand what the standard was. Was this normal? Is this what I just need to go through? And they helped me weigh my options to decide what I wanted to do and should do. So I will say, you know, don't make an emotional decision. Weigh your options. Make sure your ducks are in a row. Don't be worried that others think you're a quitter, or that, you know, you might have a bad professional relationship with the person. I think you make the choice for you, and don't care what other people think. You know, don't attach yourself to too many things. Focus on yourself. You know, it's been a little difficult switching from the private sector to the public sector, just because I went from like a litigation mind to a transactional mind. But I feel like if you find what excites your soul, you'll find the work that you would like to do. Maybe if that's in a new practice area, maybe if that's with a new employer, just don't be scared to leave.
That's really good advice. So I guess in general, from our panelists, I'd like to kind of wrap up and get just general advice from you. Is there anything in general that you wish that that somebody had told you, any kind of advice that, whether you were in law school or practicing, any kind of advice that you wish you had gotten from somebody, and whether it's, you know, to a 1L or a 2L or a 3L, just advice?
I'll start off. I think it was two really important things. One was to use the time that you have left in law school to shore up any weaknesses that you have. If there's something that you're not good at, if there's something that makes you uncomfortable and you're thinking, oh, well, I'm going into litigation, so I'll never have to do this, or, oh, I'm going into corporate, so I'll never have to do this. You need to just put that out of your mind. You have no idea what you're going to be asked to do. And if there's something that makes you uncomfortable, you're not good at writing, then you need to take a second writing class. If you feel like, oh, I'm not really good at legal research, that was something that was really tough for me for the brief, then you need to take the advanced legal writing class. You don't like to speak in public, then you need to take a negotiation class or something that is going to require you to do that, so that when you get out and it's time for you to start practicing, you can feel confident in yourself. Because there's going to be times where you're asked to do something that you don't know how to do, and you don't want to have that attack of confidence, like, I don't know how to do this, I'm not good at this, I'm not good enough, and that's going to just take you down a rabbit hole. Number two is to get a mentor and a sponsor. And I was just recently talking to my mentors about this, so I feel really great passing this on. They're two different things. A mentor is someone who is going to be there to really pour into you, to talk to you about your work product, to really give you that day-to-day advice. Here's what I did, here's how I can do better, to really have that personal investment. While a sponsor is someone who is going to support you in getting different types of work. This person is going to be the one who is most likely at your job, who's like, oh, I have a project, give it to her. Oh, I have a project, give it to him. This is the person who's really going to be supporting you in that, and it's going to be important for your growth, for you to have both of those things. So I would say those are my two pieces of advice.
I also have two pieces of advice. The first thing is, I always have the motto, what would a mediocre man do? I think a lot of the times women don't take the role that men do. They're selfish sometimes. They apply for things that they aren't technically qualified for. And we try to have all of our ducks in a row before we apply. So I always ask myself, what would a mediocre man do? And you should do the same. And then the second thing is a quote I saw on Twitter a few weeks ago, and it basically said, don't attach yourself to a person, place, company, organization, or a project. Attach yourself to a mission, a calling, or a purpose, and that's how you keep your power and your peace. So I will wrap my advice up with ground yourself. Not everyone's path is the same. What's for you won't miss you. Enjoy the journey, dream big, and good luck.
Wow, lots of great advice, hard to follow. Okay, so I think that my advice, so I went for more a stepped approach for like 1Ls, 2Ls, people who are looking for like internships and trying to figure out jobs, like in even 3Ls, people who are looking for jobs. Remember that interviews are a two-way street. I went in interviews feeling very much like I had to be what the firms wanted, and I had to figure out what that was and then fit that mold and whatever. But that's going to end up in a place where you are not happy because you're trying to be something that you are not. You're trying to be what they want, and that's not really ever going to result in a good fit. But you should think about what you want and how you can best fit in with any firm or organization, whatever, whatever sort of entity you're looking to work for. And so ask the questions that matter to you. When they ask if you have questions, like really ask what you want to know. Like I used to ask, how often do you wear suits? Which is like a really, I don't know, kind of a silly question, but like I don't like wearing suits. And if I was going to have to wear a suit every day, like that would affect my happiness at that job. Or it's just something I would want to know going in. Like then I wouldn't be, it wouldn't be something I didn't expect. And I would be like, oh, dang, now I gotta go buy some suits. Or like something else I used to ask about was pro bono activities and public service that firms participated in and what they were committed to. And I could tell that some firms didn't necessarily like that question, but I wanted to be somewhere that prioritized that, or at least, tolerated it. And so that was something that was important for me. So figure out what's important to you and make sure that you at least know where the employer stands on those issues before you make a decision, so that you can make an informed decision whether or not what they think is something that you can live with. And then really simple advice for people who are about to start studying for the bar: don't think about it until you absolutely have to. And I know everything's different this year, so that probably doesn't count, but like hopefully in the future, if we go back to normal, like Barbary or whatever organization you get a bar prep course from will start like emailing you really early. Just ignore it. It's stressful enough as it is. Don't think about it until you absolutely have to. And that's my very small piece of advice for bar takers.
I think with mine, all good advice again. So I guess the thing is we need to be aware of our mental health. And you might not have had any issue beforehand of any type of depression or, maybe going out and partying a little too much or a little too hard, things like that. You might not have an issue. Just make sure you're aware of yourself whenever you're starting and you're working those long hours every single day for so long, you might not realize that you haven't talked to your friends or family in 3 months. You don't realize, and that's not to say that that's going to happen to you. I'm just saying sometimes, some people take it so far in their work that they realize they're neglecting sleep. They're neglecting, making sure if a workout regimen is important to you and they haven't gone to the gym in a year, things like that. Do what you need to do, whether that's shopping, whether that's going out, whether that's, spending time with friends and family. Any of those things, you need to make sure that you make a priority along with your job. Because at the end of the day, on your deathbed, you're not going to be like, well, I billed 2,000 hours or like 5,000 hours, whatever it makes. That's not going to matter. What's going to matter is your child's first steps, your child's, first day of school. Those things matter. And that's what we need to take. And I think sometimes as professional lawyers, we get lost or we burn out within a couple of years. So if you like this profession, make sure you cherish yourself just as much as this profession. And my second thing really quick is, along, I guess, with the mental health is knowing how to market yourself as a young associate or as a 1L, 2L, 3L. You can never start early. Make sure join things like DWLA or DAYL or any type of professional organization that you feel. It doesn't have to be a legal professional organization, but those sorts of things, because your first clients are going to be the people you work for. The second thing is it's never too early to start, I guess, attending networking, happy hour, things like that, because if you're going to make part even at a big firm where you feel like the work's always going to come, when you're up for partner or things like that and you're expected to bring in business like 8 years down the road or 10 years down the road, it's a lot easier to maintain and have those people in those relationships that you fostered from college and law school that might be in-house than to try to search for business somewhere.
That's all really great advice. Thank you. And I know we're kind of running right up to the hour. I wanted to at least answer just at least one of the questions that we got and see if anybody has any particular insight on this one. Do any of the panelists have advice on how to search for jobs outside of the traditional OCI setting?
Yes, I can answer that. I will say I did not go through OCI. I will say, I will piggyback off of Alexis. Start marketing yourself early. I got my jobs through mentors, word of mouth. When I worked as a Westlaw rep, I was the rep for the DFW. I had several firms trying to get me to come to their firm from Westlaw. So I would say market yourself early, mentor, network, join events, organizations, and get out there.
Awesome. And then, if we have briefly time for one more question, any advice on how to negotiate salaries? Do any of you have experience with doing that with starting your jobs?
Again, it's me. I will say what I did was I looked up the mediums of your salary range for the firm. You can look up different staffing agencies. They all have the range or the range of your salary, and I would shoot high, and then that way when you negotiate, have a set low, like the least that you will accept, and then work your way down so you can negotiate that. But I will, look it up, talk to other attorneys that are, just barely a couple years out, and you should be fine to negotiate that salary.
Okay, well, I really appreciate your time here, and this has been really great, good insight. So thank you so much for sharing your experiences with everyone. And thank you to DWLA and SMU Law for hosting this panel event. And thank you for all of those in attendance. We really hope that this has been a beneficial learning experience for everyone. So thank you all, and everyone stay safe.